Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod and with our Big Ten tournament quarterfinal pregame show sponsored by Fanduel Sportsbook. Fanduel, of course, should be your go-to source for betting on the sports you love to watch, whether it's a parlay or you just want to stick to the money line. You'll find all the odds you need on the Fanduel app. Easy to download. You can get started right away. It is tournament time, so you can get all the millions of different bets, parlays, all kinds of things when it comes to NCAA tournament. Head on over to Fanduel. It should be your go-to stop for betting on all those games. Also, as a reminder, go to vote in our Fanduel Player of the Game at Slido. That's SLIDO.com. And, of course, hashtag TFFINOTS, where you can vote for the Michigan State Player of the Game. Congratulations are in order for our Beat Rod contest to two who tied for first place. We have Enoch Hines and Bill Herbst. Both finished with scores of 44. And just as a comparison, last year the best scores were 50, so quite a bit better than last year's competition. Enoch won on the tiebreaker. And for third place, we also had another tie, which had Rich Wagenheim, who got one with this tiebreaker over Douglas Kopp, and they both had 48 points. Other notable scores: my wife finished 10th in the competition with 55. I was right behind with a ton of other people at 56, and about half the entrants had under 60, sub 60 scores. Rod, of course, had 62. So much better than you did the first time. I think we did this. We were, I think, almost dead last. Dead last this year was 80 points. So you did much better than that. Of course, in a little bit, I'll reach out to them at range for gift cards for Nudge Printing. I actually believe Enoch won our tournament bracket competition last year as well. So he's got all kinds of Nudge gear that he's been toting around. Which reminds me, of course, you can go over to our contest page at tffinots.com/contests. There you can find a way to join the bracket challenge through Pool Host. That will be active once the brackets come out, I guess, on Sunday, whenever that is. If you've already competed in the contest, you will be emailed. You should get a notification of that. If not, you can just head on over there and get signed up. It is a little bit of twist with the scoring. We reward picking upsets, since you get some bonus points for getting upsets right. So just kind of make things a little bit different. And finally, another quick programming note that because of the really terrible Wi-Fi I'm dealing with here at the hotel, we will not be doing a live post-game show. But there will be a post-game show, but it's just we can't do it live because the Wi-Fi cannot handle that extra added part. So I'll do my best to get the player of the game set up ahead of time. So hopefully that'll work, so you can still vote during the game. All right, okay, Rod. I've been here in Chicago since Tuesday. Made it through 5 sessions of 2 games, and we're finally to the first time Michigan State will be on the court. Of course, I still have to make it through one more session this morning, and then over half the Big Ten teams have been eliminated. At this point, no one's left who needs the automatic qualifier. Everybody left is presumably in the tournament, pretty much a lock at this point. We've got all the top 8 seeds are left, which is a little unusual. Sometimes we have someone who's made it through to this point who's not, but that's not the case this time. So motivations for winning, I don't know. Who knows? So we'll talk about the Bruins, I guess, to begin with. So they are pretty easily beat Rutgers, doing what Michigan State was unable to do in their 2 matchups, which was neutralize Tariq Francis. He kind of sat on the bench with kind of sulking for a good portion of the second half of that game, just not able to get going at all. Eventually, he put him in with 8 minutes left, and he got some stuff done, but not a whole lot. Did not help a whole lot with my fantasy Big Ten tournament team, since I had him on my team. And Donovan Dent dropped a triple-double in the game, which catapulted my daughter into first place.
First in Big Ten history, by the way.
I wondered about that.
Big Ten tournament history, I should
say.
Yeah,
exactly. It's kind of a fun day, too. I mean, Nick Martinelli walks up the court for the last time in a Northwestern uniform. He'd played there all 4 years, which is, going to be less likely, as time goes on, and to a standing ovation to the entire arena, which is pretty cool. It's kind of sad times because he was fantastic in the Big Ten tournament as well. He was really fun to watch. But let's talk about the Bruins a little bit, because Michigan State has played them once. They played them in East Lansing. When was that? Like mid-January or something like that?
No,
February. Okay.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. And now Michigan State, the last time they played on, this is Friday the 13th, right? I think Michigan State's playing here.
Yep.
So UCLA is 22-10. They finished the Big Ten 13-7, and they were the 6th seed. They're ranked 29th in KenPom, and like I mentioned, they had a 13-point victory over Rutgers. They've had some good victories at home, especially beat Illinois, beat Purdue, beat Nebraska. Didn't do a whole lot on the road, and they looked just really terrible when they played both Michigan and Michigan State their next game. But on offense, they're 24th. They, which is pretty impressive, I think, from the last time we talked about them. They shoot threes really well. They're 20th at 38%. They don't turn the ball over. They're third in turnover percentage, and they're 43rd in free throw shooting, which is at 76.5%. So very good. The problem is they don't shoot many threes. So although they shoot them well, they don't shoot many of them, which I think is pretty similar to what they were before. They're 261st in that, and they're 230th in offensive foul rate. So they, again, just like before, where they shoot free throws well, but they don't make it to the line very much. And 178th in 2-point shooting, 149th in the offensive. So kind of a lot of weird numbers, but it works for them. 29th is pretty good.
Yeah, it's okay.
The 24th.
And certainly significantly better than it was the first time MSU saw them. I just wanted to correct the turnovers. I gave you the wrong number on an incomplete number. It should have been 13th, not 3rd. But still really good. 13th is still plenty good. Yeah, where they've taken a jump is really, the 3-point percentage has gotten a little better, and not a massive leap, but a little bit better. Turnover percentage has remained very, very good, and they shoot free throws well when they get there. The problem, the limiter for them, is they don't get to the line very much. They're a mediocre at best offensive rebounding team. By Big Ten standards, worse than that. And their 2-point percentage, again, is very mediocre, and by Big Ten standards, worse than that. And Mick Cronin knows it. I mean, he said it walking off the floor when he was talking to Andy Katz last night. He said about the Michigan State matchup. He said, we've struggled with physicality all year. And he said, that's my fault because I'm the guy who put the roster together. And it's true. When you look at their profile at both ends, now it's not quite to the level I would say that teams like Iowa and Indiana have struggled with, but it's definitely an issue. You look at the profile at both ends. We'll get into the defense in a second. UCLA is very un-Mick Cronin-like, because they don't bring much of a physical presence. I mean, when you look at that team, say try to identify the guy that plays a physical brand of basketball. You won't find one.
Yeah.
Bilodeau is the closest, but he's not really. He's a finesse player more than anything else offensively, and a very good one. But nevertheless, when you think of Tyler Bilodeau, what's the first thing you think of? It should be him shooting a jump shot, because that's what he does. But, they could use a lot more than that, and they don't get it. Their big men don't play big particularly. And their guards even, I don't think, are particularly physical for a Big Ten backcourt. So that's the limiter. UCLA does some things very, very well. And it was another thing Cronin said. He said, we've got some skilled guys. And he does. He's right about that. There's no question. I think the issue is they don't have enough of the normal UCLA mix of skill with some ability to knock you around. And that's what's limited them. But still, pretty dangerous team offensively. You got to give them their due.
And on defense, they're pretty good. They're 44th nationally. They're
I wouldn't say that's good.
Okay. Yeah, I guess they were 14th last year, so definitely a drop off from last season.
Yeah.
They're 233rd against twos. So that kind of goes to the fact that, maybe a little bit that Mara is no longer on the team, although he didn't play a ton last year, but
it's more than that. It's more than
protection.
It's more than Mara. You're right. He was a role player for them last year. It's more than him. They lost several guys who both inside and on the perimeter who provided a physical presence. UCLA last year was a very physical team. They're anything but this year.
Yeah. They're really bad defensive rebounding. They're 239th. They do force some turnovers. They're 95th in defensive turnover rate. They guard the threes well. They're 41st against the threes, but they do give a lot of three attempts. And that was where, we talked about that game in East Lansing. Michigan State shot the lights out from three, whether that was UCLA or just Michigan State shooting, probably a combination of both there. But they covered up a lot of things that maybe Michigan State didn't do quite as well because they just hit the three just like they were gangbusters.
Yeah, and that's the one big problem with extrapolating too much from that first game, in my view, is that Michigan State did cover up some sins, as I saw it, and said so at the time when we did the post game. Like, yeah, great result. Not sure they did everything they would have wanted to do here, but the threes just made all that irrelevant. And UCLA does give up a lot of three attempts. They don't give up a lot of success. That's one of the main reasons they've been able to hang in there. And I mean, 44th for a Big Ten team and for a Mick Cronin team is not good, but it's not a disaster either. They're not a Fran Iowa defensive team,
Very few
that's
are.
clear. But one area they've improved on since the first game, and I'm not quite sure why, but it has happened. They've moved up about 60 spots in defensive foul rate. So they're putting opponents on the line less frequently than they were. So that's helped them steady the ship a little bit. But overall, their defense is basically about where it was in the first game when you look at the totality of it. And we always talk about this. To me, if you're trying to evaluate a defense, you start by evaluating how successfully you shut off opponents' water from two. And UCLA is just terrible at that. And then they compound it by giving up a ton of offensive rebounds. You do those two things that poorly, you're going to struggle to be any good overall.
Yeah, and of course, all those different characteristics of defense, I guess you could say they sort of contribute differently to the different sort of the contribution amount is different than it is. So like, you can foul less on defense, but it's not going to affect the scoring as much as like giving up a ton more offensive rebounds. So that's like, that hurts you more being a bad defensive rebound team probably than being a team that fouls more.
I would agree with that because as we've talked about with certain teams this year, when you see a poor defense, but they don't foul a lot, what that probably tells you is, they're not physical enough.
Right. Yeah. So finally, as far as tempo, as with usual with Mick Cronin teams, is they don't play very fast. They're 252nd in average length of offensive possession. They're 325th in overall tempo. So one of the slowest teams in the country. And then as I struggle to try and read with my progressive lenses, we're going to talk about some interesting wagers with Fanduel. Actually, I did not even think to get this up because we rarely actually look at this ahead of time because it's so far out from the game. But we probably there's a line for this game. What do you have for the line from Torvik? I
don't know Torvik. Ken Palm, I can tell you, is Michigan State by 4.
Yeah, and I should have it here on FanDuel app. Should be easy to find. There it is. I have 5.5 points actually for Michigan State here.
Okay.
The over-under.
I think that's fair. Sorry, go ahead. Over-under.
Oh, the over-under is 142.5. So averaging about 71 points a team.
That seems fair. Yeah. Both those numbers seem pretty inarguable to me.
Yeah. You feel comfortable with that line? I think with Michigan State 5.5 point favorite. Would you take that?
I think they should cover that line.
Mm-hmm.
This was honestly, and it's rare you would say this, but normally if you had a 14 seed playing a 6 seed, you'd be rooting for the 14 seed to win, especially if it would then be their third game in 3 days, right?
Right.
I wasn't. And that's, now you could say, well, you're a prisoner of the moment and objectively, UCLA is a much better team than Rutgers. That's true. But I didn't feel UCLA was a better matchup for Michigan, or I didn't feel Rutgers was a better matchup for Michigan State than UCLA. So I was happy to see UCLA win. We know this. MSU played Rutgers twice, and both times, more so the first time than the second, but they really struggled. And Rutgers, for all their limitations, plays harder and with more force than UCLA does. And I think when Michigan State is playing you look at their results against the finesse teams in the Big Ten, and there aren't a lot of them. I would say Indiana, Iowa, and UCLA are your three teams that really, bottom line, are less physical than everybody else. I think that's probably fair. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. MSU hammered all three of those teams. They blew Indiana out twice. They blew Iowa out, and they blew UCLA out. That doesn't mean they're going to blow UCLA out today, but it does tell you something about how those matchups have tended to go for Michigan State against that type of team. And Rutgers, again, lots of limitations over there, but one of them that's not is physicality. They don't rebound well. They don't defend particularly well. Those things don't add up, but we know it from having seen it twice. They play very hard and they play with force. So I wanted to see UCLA come through this. To me, again, keeping in mind what Michigan State has done against finesse teams, 5.5 ought to be a coverable number.
Well, let's go through the other three Big Ten games too. Then, so we have Purdue, Nebraska. That's a 2-2 versus the 7th seed. Purdue is actually a 3.5 point favorite in that game.
Yeah, I've seen some people on social media, which means nothing, but actually even some media accounts who ought to know better, saying, preseason Purdue is finally here. After one game in the Big Ten tournament against a Northwestern team did Northwestern play? Were they in their third game in 3 days? They were, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They were on a little bit. Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Talk about an overreaction. I understand Purdue hit some shots, but Jesus, I don't know that Purdue has found a new level. It wouldn't shock me if they do. I don't think that's impossible, but which is why, again, it's ironic. Normally, you would be hoping that Michigan State would finish with the 2 seed rather than the 3 because you would face a worse team, right?
Yep.
But I didn't feel that way. I was happy in a sense. I wanted Michigan State to beat Michigan. That would have been, and then you just roll with whatever. But when that was off the table, it was fine for Michigan State to be a 3 because they'd match up with UCLA rather than Purdue. My concern was that Purdue would find it for a day or two, at least, and actually be the kind of team that they thought they were going to be. How all that plays out today against Nebraska, I don't know.
Yep, I agree. I think the motivations are unknown and sort of like as far as these teams and how they come in and play. There's no way to predict it, I think.
What is either? I mean, you could make an argument that in both cases, more so Purdue's, maybe they're in need of a win to stay off the 4 line.
Maybe, they're both projected as like a high 3 seed. Yeah, I suppose.
Be a motivation. I don't know if even with a loss, if Nebraska can slip off the 3 line. I don't know. I suppose if you're looking for motivations both ways, that would be it. That you could argue, hey, this year it's very much worth your while to stay off that 4 line and avoid a Sweet 16 against a 1 seed. You'd much rather get it against a 2. I don't even know how true that is right now because we don't know if you happen to be the 4 seed, but you're in Duke's region. I'm sure you didn't see any of it. Duke struggled, really struggled with Florida State. And that's their first game. I think it's their first game without Caleb Foster, and they didn't have the big kid and Ngamba as well. He's supposed to be back. The big kid Foster's done for the year, but I think it's fair to suggest might not be the same Duke team we've seen all year. So Who knows? I mean, all of this that's why there just are no absolutes with this stuff. But I would think if you're looking for motivation, that's probably the motivation they would both have is get a win, ensure that they're a 3, and which teams favor that cuts in, I just don't know. It's hard for me to pick a favorite in that game. I think that's very, very close. I will say this,
Right.
Nebraska over the course of the season has been a vastly more consistent team. There's no doubt about
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And they're a much more balanced team. They're significantly better defensively than Purdue is.
The game that opens up here in a little bit is Michigan Ohio State. That's a 13.5-point line in Michigan's favor, which I actually kind of like that line. I think they're going to just stomp Ohio State pretty easily, but that'd be my hunch.
They won the 2 regular season meetings. They were comfortable wins. I don't recall them being absolute blowouts. I think they were both the margins were both in the low teens, if I remember. I mean, I could find out. Let me look real quick here. But that seems like a fair line to me. I wouldn't have any objection to that. Yeah, they beat Ohio State at Chrysler by 12. Oh, I'm sorry. And then they beat them by 21 in Columbus. So that was a bigger win. I would say this, and I said this on the Spartan Mag board yesterday. Obviously, you look at it overall and you would say Michigan should win very comfortably. That makes complete sense and is the probable outcome. However, the one thing you could say about Ohio State that they've got, and they're dynamic, is if you're looking for an upset, a good place to start if trying to find a team capable of pulling an upset is one that has multiple guards that can just go out and get catch on fire for 40 minutes and carry you. And Ohio State has that in Thornton and Mobley. They both played pretty well in their win yesterday over Iowa. Again, you look at the rest of it, you say Ohio State's front line can't match Michigan's, not even close. Michigan's got much more depth. Even with Kason out, they're a deeper team. All of those things, clearly they're a better offensive and defensive team overall. No question about any of that. Better rebounding team. Across the board, it's check, 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 check in Michigan's favor. But Ohio State does have those 2 guys. And I'm certainly far from predicting that it happens, but Ohio State does have a puncher's chance because of those players. If Thornton and Mobley are really on, they could pull it off. You also don't know what Michigan's motive. We talk about motivation, right? I understand that their clownish coach has, for some unknown reason, made the Big Ten tournament a talking point for his team since November, which is bizarre beyond belief to me. But never heard a coach do that, ever. Talk about the Big Ten tournament as something to prepare for in November. It was wild. And that got very little attention because they don't have a media that actually asks any real questions of anything. Because trust me, if I was in that room, that would have been question 1, like, what the hell are you talking about? But be that as it may, you don't know if the motivation level is translating to those players for this event. And then you say, well, what does Michigan have to play for? The only thing they've got to play for is theoretically they could earn the 1 seed if Duke stumbles in the ACC tournament and Michigan wins the Big Ten tournament. Maybe that's enough to get them the number 1 overall, but I don't even know how much that matters for them practically at this point. So you don't know what the motivation level is going to be for Michigan in this thing. I would assume they would be motivated enough to win this game pretty easily, but we'll see.
Yeah. And the final line is the Illinois-Wisconsin game, which, funny enough, I do not have because I'm here in Chicago. And apparently, if you're in Illinois, you're not allowed to wager on Illinois teams or some sort of state law. So I have no idea what the line is for that game.
Let's see. That's interesting. I'll need to pull up Fanduel.
I wonder why Fanduel asked me why I was in the state of Illinois. Now I know why.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. Sorry, this is going to take me a second, folks, as we work through this. Trying to find, I can't find the line. Yeah, I can't find the line. Let's just, so we don't sit here for 10 minutes. let's just see what Ken Palm has to say, and we know we're getting in the ballpark, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's going to be a couple points. I imagine they'll favor Illinois because they've been one of the top
I would
metrics
absolutely
in the country.
I
So
would absolutely
it'll be a
assume
couple
so.
points.
Yes, in fact, larger than you might think. Illinois is a 7-point favorite at Ken
Oh
Palm.
my.
That's a
Yeah.
big line.
Well,
If
there's a
FanDuel
lot of
line
variance in Wisconsin.
there is, and that's it's funny because I'm seeing Wisconsin getting talked up in some places as a sneaky pick to go on a deep run.
Right.
And I get it because, again, we just talked about Ohio State with their two guards, right? Well, Wisconsin has probably an even better combination in Boyd and Blackwell.
Yep.
But there's a couple reasons to pump the brakes on Wisconsin. One is Nolan Winter didn't play yesterday. Now, I think the plan is for him to play today, their big man. But I know it didn't matter for them yesterday, but I'm telling you, if he were to be limited, not as effective as normal, et cetera, that's a big problem for Wisconsin in games going forward, starting with today against Illinois and all their size. That would be a problem. The other issue is their defense. That has not changed.
No.
Their guards are great offensively. No doubt about that. That's all fine. But, it's not enough if you're talking about a team trying to go on a deep run to say, well, we're just going to go out and outscore people. That could work for a while, and it's certainly not unheard of that a team could go on a heater and get to the second weekend. That absolutely can happen. But this is the 62nd ranked defense in the country. 62. Right. They don't stop twos or threes well at all. They do defensively rebound. They don't foul a ton. But man, that shot limitation success is a low number. And that's a problem. So I don't know if I'd hang 7 on Illinois. That's an aggressive line to me. But I do think Illinois will win if I got to pick. Wisconsin certainly could. But I would pick Illinois to win. They're, again, a far, far more balanced team. And at this time of year, especially when you're talking about single elimination tournaments, to me, the most important thing is balance. Are you good enough offensively and defensively that you can win a game played any particular way? And Wisconsin wants to play fast. So Illinois can do that.
Yeah, they definitely had a tough game against Washington. They were kind of cruising in. Then
they were blowing them out, and then they let off the gas.
Well, I don't even know if it was as much as just they just couldn't stop Washington. Washington kept scoring. They missed.
Well, that's what I mean.
A couple threes, and then next thing you know, it's a 1-point game at the end. So,
just
to your point, right? That was
yeah. And
all right.
It's that's going to be the problem is, can Wisconsin's offensive brilliance, particularly from their two guards, outweigh the other issues they've got? I'm telling you this right now, heading into the turn. Oh, and the other thing, which I didn't mention, let's also keep in mind, and it's a problem for both of these teams. This is actually, if you're somebody who loves people turning basketball into a game of horse, this is a great one for you, because you've got two. I want to see where they're both at currently, because they've been, Wisconsin's currently they're 6th in 3-point attempts as a percentage of overall field goal attempts. They're 6th in the country. Illinois is 9th. So they're both top 10. That's an area I don't want to be top 10 in. And it's a problem for both of them. And it's the reason why I'm going to be fading both of them almost regardless. I can't think of a matchup, a path that would lead me to conclude otherwise. I'm going to fade both of them when the brackets get announced on Sunday. Not that either one is incapable of getting to a Sweet 16, but I'm not picking them for a Final Four. And in Illinois' case, That's unfortunate because they do have the material where, depending upon what their draw looked like, I could see them as a Final Four team, but not the way they play offensively. I'm not betting on that holding up for 4 straight games, and the same is true for Wisconsin. But enjoy today's shot fest because it's going to be
I
wild.
We'll score a lot of points in our fantasy team. And I think that probably over-under is going to be about 73-point attempts in this game.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising. Right. 35 aside, wouldn't shock me at all.
Well, the first day was here. Excuse me. On Tuesday, we had some hail here in Chicago, which fortunately did not damage our car out in the parking lot. But we did get a lot of nasty weather, and that is spring. And so it means it's coming, and it means you need to have functional gutters. Make sure your gutters are working properly. And of course, if you have a problem or you need to make sure that they're working okay, contact the Brothers Just Your Gutters. They do fantastic work, great pricing, and you get 10% off simply by mentioning Final Four when you get your estimate. You can do that at our support page at the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. Greg or Kurt will take care of you, whether you're in the east or the west side of the state. They can replace things, repair them, whatever it might be, whether it's your home or business. They'll come out. If it's got a gutter, they can take care of it. They are experts in gutters and only gutters. And so get in the ladder so you don't have to. And I'd at least recommend, if you don't have leaf guards, get some put on so you don't have to clean out your gutters. It's a real pain in the butt. They, of course, sponsor our player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, Rod will tell us after we go through the lineup. And again, I'm trying to do my best with my progressive lenses since it's not sitting properly in my face right now. So we'll be with Donovan.
I gotta stop you there for a second. I'm a little bit, I hadn't thought all of this through, but it's hitting me now. For anybody that listens to this, thank you. Of course, we appreciate you listening to every episode. But this one, because of the timing, et cetera, is probably not going to be one of our most highly listened to episodes, I'm going to guess. And yet this is the one that you're wearing the basketball. So I just wanted to point out I'm aware of all of that.
Yeah, it has been a little bit of a struggle as you get older and have the progressive lenses to try and get the turns out having a basketball in your head, it makes things a little bit more hard in life. So as we mentioned before, Donovan Dent had the triple-double. He was 6'2" senior, transferred from New Mexico. He's averaging 13.6 points a game, 7.5 assists a game, and to just 2 turnovers a game. So very good. Shooting 42, 24, and 63, which is shocking considering he was shooting 49, 41, and 78 last year. Again, like he said, he was very, very, very good last night. The one thing he didn't have dialed in, which is what he hasn't had dialed in all year, is I think he had at least 1 or 2 3-point attempts.
He had one. He was 0 for 1.
Yeah, he had many open looks that he just passed up and he just distributed, which worked fine for UCLA. They had no trouble against Northwestern.
Look, and I've said this a few times.
Or Rutgers, yeah.
When you factor in the amount of money UCLA reportedly paid, I've heard people say $3 million. I've heard people say $4 million. Let's assume it's somewhere in that range. When you factor in that, and then, of course, the thing that really matters more, I guess, is expectations, what people thought he was going to mean to them. I think he's clearly been one of the bigger disappointments in a way. That doesn't mean he's given them nothing. 7.2 assists per game, which is about a 3.5 to 1 ratio. Pretty good. Yeah. For a high usage guard, he's done those things well. He has scored some, not as much as I think they thought he would, certainly not as efficiently as they thought he would, but it's not like he's gone out and scored 6 points a night. I also think it's fair, in the interest of fairness, to note he is probably playing his best basketball of the season right now. His 3-point percentage, as awful as it is, has gone up 5 points since Michigan State last saw him. So in the last month, it's gone from 19% to 24%. Now, we got to keep that in check. As you know, and it's absolutely correct, you see it when you watch UCLA play, he passes on a lot of open shots.
Yeah.
So that's an issue, right? That he doesn't take those looks that are there for him. But I do think we're not looking at the Donovan Dent that I think everybody expected coming into the season, but we are looking at a Donovan Dent that is the best he's been all year. So how all that plays out, your guess is as good as mine. But I do think he's a guy who's coming in with a little more confidence probably than he had in the first matchup. And that's a big deal because you're talking about the point guard.
Right. Next, we have Trent Perry, 6'4" sophomore, averaging 12.4 points a game on 45, 41, and 86 shooting, 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And he's definitely looked good. He had 12 against Rutgers last night and had a nice game.
Yeah, he's a good player. I mean, offensively, particular, good shooter. He's not a super heavy usage guy, but and his scoring has ticked down a little bit since the first MSU game, but not massively. He's lost about a point or so a game since then. But that's also understandable because the next guy we're going to talk about has come back into the lineup, which changes the dynamic a little bit for a guy like Perry. There are probably less shots to go around, but he's been a good player as a sophomore. Definitely improved after a kind of freshman year. So he's a guy Michigan State's got to be conscious of as a shooter, particularly.
Then we have Sky Clark, the player you're just mentioning there, sort of alluding to, 6'3" senior who's played for, I don't know, 4 or 5 teams or been on 4 or 5 teams up until he landed finally at UCLA. He has been injured this year, so he's only started 18 games, averaging almost 12 points a game, shooting 47, 46, 88. So he plays secondary point guard, I guess, when Dent goes off, but for the most part, he's a shooting guard.
Yeah, and that's been, credit to Mick Cronin. I mean, he has hammered himself a lot this year for his roster, his GM skills, we'll call them, his roster assembly skills. He's lamented that all year long. But one thing he did last year, and it's carried over to this year when Sky's been healthy, is he unlocked the Sky Clark puzzle. Because Sky Clark was a guy people talked about as a point guard. And he originally committed to Kentucky, decommitted to them after an injury, ended up at Illinois. That was a disaster. He left there in the middle of the season, if I remember correctly, went to Louisville and was part of a god-awful Louisville team under Kenny Payne. Wasn't any better there for him. But he has found himself at UCLA, and I think the reason he's found himself is those point guard duties have not been put on his shoulders. As you say, he plays a backup role at times. He'll help out with the ball handling. He's fine there. He's not a disaster by any means. But if you're asking him to be your primary guy as a lead guard, that's not going to do you or him any favors. And so the fact that Mick Cronin figured that out, so you know what? I'm going to use this guy primarily as a scorer. Secondary ball handling can help a little bit there, but primarily he's there to give us point production. And that's worked extremely well for 2 years running with him. So I give Mick Cronin credit where he's due, at least in my opinion, and give Sky Clark credit because I was as down on Sky Clark as you could be on a highly regarded. I thought he was a disaster. And because he got in the right place and in the right role, it goes to show you sometimes, in fact, frequently, it's about that more than anything else.
Yeah.
Can you be put in a spot that makes sense for you, for your game, your strengths and weaknesses, all of those things? And at UCLA, I think that's been done well. And he's part of the reason that I think you can argue UCLA is playing a little better brand of basketball than they were coming into the first MSU game. Is he's firmly back now. The MSU game, I think, was his first game back after an injury. So now he's had time to settle in, and I think that's made them a better team.
So playing at the 4 is Eric Daly, 6'8", 230-pound junior, averaging 11.3 points a game, 5.5 rebounds a game, shooting 49, 30, and 72. He had 10 and 6 against Rutgers. Solid game. I think that's kind of just sort of how he is. He's not going to jump off the page at you.
He hasn't been. I think he's another guy, less to a lesser degree than Donovan Dent, but I would think he's another guy that maybe you look at the production and feel like he's underachieved a little bit, not massively.
Sure,
11 and 5.5 is not a disaster, but when UCLA brought him in before last season, he was coming off a freshman year at Oklahoma State where he'd played very well and shown a lot of versatility. And they really seemed to think they were getting a guy who, at least as I recall the conversation in UCLA circles, it seemed they thought he could be a guy who could be an all Big Ten level player, like really good impact. It kind of like, in a sense, I'm not comparing them as players entirely, but in a sense, maybe give them something like what Lendenborg has given Michigan, right? A guy with size who, despite that, is very versatile, can do a lot of different things to help you. Maybe isn't going to be a 25 point a night guy, but he's going to be really good in almost every area. And instead, I would say Daly's been good-ish, in a lot of areas. Not great in anything. The 3-point shooting in particular, I think, although it's gotten a little better since the first MSU game, he's now up to 30%. He was mired in the mid-20s before that game. It's gotten a little better. It's still not where it would need to be for him to be a true 3-level threat. But a guy who's capable of, certainly he's going to make some plays. He's going to do a lot of things that UCLA needs him to do if they're to win. I just don't think the impact has been quite at the level they anticipated.
And finally, for the starters, we have Tyler Bilodeau, 6'9", 240-pound senior. He originally came in from Oregon State, which is was the Pac-12 at the time, I think.
That's right.
And then to join the Big Ten at UCLA and leave to West Coast Conference. That's crazy. He's averaging 18 points a game, 5.8 rebounds a game, shooting 52, 46, 87. He's obviously one of the better players in the team. 5 seems like kind of a little out of position for him, but he finished 21-5 against Rutgers, and Rutgers is admittedly a smaller team, so you can kind of get, aside from Obole, so you can kind of get away with him there at the 5.
Yeah, he is miscast as a 5, but it's not like Mick Cronin's got a lot of options with his team. I think it is the right move. They've been playing better since they've gone with this 3-guard look. But I will say this. I think UCLA, if we get the Carson Cooper that we've seen lately on the interior, I think UCLA, definitely if Jax ends up being guarded by him in the post, UCLA could have problems.
Yeah.
Because Bilodeau's just he's not built to really defend 5s. Offensively, you get away with it because whatever. He can give you a little bit of post scoring, but he's actually a matchup problem in the sense that he can draw big men. Less of a problem for Michigan State than some other teams, let's say, but he could draw people away from the rim as a real legitimate stretch at the 5. But defensively is where I think there are issues presented by it. Look, Bilodeau's a really good player, a really good offensive player, very skilled kid, can do a lot of things for you. Decent rebounder, best of a bad bunch, I guess is how you'd put it for UCLA. But, he's been their best player all year. He was arguably their best player last year. So it's not a real shocker that he's had the kind of season he's had.
And then moving on to reserves, we'll begin with Xavier Booker, who was a starter for half the year, maybe, or a third of the year.
A little more than that.
So he was playing the 5 for a while, starting out. 6'11" junior, obviously transferred from Michigan State. He's averaging 7 points a game, 3.5 rebounds a game this year. Plays about half the game, about 20 minutes, although the minute usage has gone down, I think, a little bit recently to bring that average down to 20. But he's shooting 57, 44, and 71. So, in some respects, the 44 is way better than he was shooting at Michigan State from 3. I think he was sub 20%, I think, at Michigan State.
Yeah, he
but his volume is a lot less, too.
Yeah. Particularly his volume as a percentage of his overall shots. That's another thing I would give Mick Cronin credit for. It's not like the switch has turned on entirely or even mostly for Book, but offensively, he's playing a much smarter game. He's a capable deep shooter. That obviously 44% tells you that, right? And his freshman season at Michigan State, I think he was around 33. So we know he could shoot. He had a rough sophomore year. A lot went into that. Didn't mean Booker couldn't shoot. We know he could shoot, but he's not a guy I think you want taking the majority of his shot. You want him playing closer to the rim more often, because that's where his length can impact things. And you see it. I saw it not in huge stints, but I saw it yesterday.
Yeah,
There
a
were a
couple
couple of
blocks.
occasions where, but offensively, I mean, there were a couple of occasions where the ball just kind of found him around the rim and he was able to score because he's 6'11" and he's long. So that was an issue at Michigan State. It has not been an issue at UCLA. What has been an issue at UCLA that was also a problem at MSU is that Book is just not a physical player. He's gotten bigger. He's worked on it clearly, but just sometimes it comes down to a mentality. And he just does not have the mentality of a guy who's going to bring his physicality to bear in a game. And it doesn't. And that's been one of the reasons UCLA's had so many problems, particularly defensively, is they don't have an answer there. Book can, as you mentioned a second ago, he can block the occasional shot, but it's not nearly enough to change the other elements of what they're lacking the paint defensively.
Yeah, and rebounding too. He's just not the rebounder you would expect some guy 6'11". Yeah.
Right.
Moving on to Jamar Brown, 6'5", senior transfer from Kansas City. He's averaging 4.3 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, plays about 17 minutes, shooting 43, 33, and 100, with the majority of his takes outside the arc.
Yeah, and he gives them another depth piece, but I would say his role for the bulk of the season has been, okay, give us some perimeter shooting off the bench. His shooting slipped a little bit lately. That's the thing UCLA's had, and the surprise, they've had some guys improve, like the biggest one, most obvious one being Dent, but also Daly to a degree. And then they've had some guys slip back a little bit. Perry slipped back a little bit. Brown has slipped back a little bit. I think Brown was at 36 or 37% coming into the first MSU game. He's down to 33 now. Not a disaster, but it tells you that it's been going in reverse for him lately.
And then we have Stephen Jamerson, 6'10", 230-pound senior transfer coming from San Diego, averaging a little under 2 points a game, about 2 rebounds a game, plays about 10 minutes. He's famous, at least in Michigan State, for the season for the second person who's thrown out of the Breslin Center. The first coach was former player Paul Davis by Tom Izzo, and this one he's thrown out of the game by his coach Mick Cronin after a hard foul, we'll say, catching Carson Cooper, who is on a breakaway. I mean, it's kind of like a dumb foul, but whatever.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that for a second. If you remember, it was a breakaway, and Jamerson fouled him. I would say, I think the flagrant one was the correct call, because I think you could define the foul as reckless. Coop took a hard fall. It wasn't anything that hurt him in the end, but he took offense. I do think, even though I think the F1 was the right call, it perhaps looked worse than it was in real time. And Mick Cronin certainly thought that, because, as you say, Mick Cronin ended up ejecting his own player. I think he had fouled out on that play.
That fouled him out anyway, but he couldn't go to the bench.
But
he
Mick
had to
Cronin made him leave. And he ended up apologizing to Jamerson. And after that, we found out some stuff that I didn't know. I don't think anybody knew. I never heard anybody talk about it, that Stephen Jamerson actually started at Michigan State, wanted to be a walk-on, and failed to make the team as a walk-on.
Right.
So they do have tryouts the fall. And usually Michigan State, with most of the walk-ons, I would say it's more common that they have targeted, sometimes we hear the term preferred walk-on.
Right.
It's usually guys that they've targeted. They oftentimes end up as local guys. Like this year, you've got 3 of them, right? They're all Michigan kids, Nick Sanders and the Walton twins. They're all Michigan kids. That's frequently the dynamic. Jamerson's not from Michigan. What I've not heard anybody explore, and would be interesting, I don't think we're likely to get it, is why he opted to do that, to just enroll at Michigan State. Was there some kind of familial connection? We don't know, but whatever. He could have been on the other side of this game, theoretically.
Right.
And
yeah.
It's kind of surprising that a 6'10" guy with some athletic ability wasn't good enough to make the cut. But I'd have to think about who was on. Steven Izzo was definitely on the team at that point. I'm going to guess Nick Sanders was, and then I'm not sure who else was there. Maybe there just wasn't a slot. But in any event, he's a cool story in a way. He bounces back from that, ends up at San Diego, and became a pretty good player for a San Diego team that last year was kind of the darling of well, actually, I don't know. That might have been UC San Diego. In any event, he made himself a player.
Yeah.
Bottom line, he made himself a player. And he ends up at UCLA. So he does end up in the Big Ten after all. His role has declined a lot recently, and it's not because of that incident. It's just that UCLA has determined that they're better off going with heavier minutes for a small ball approach. And so Jamerson doesn't really fit into that. They'd rather give those minutes to Sky Clark than they would Jamerson, which you understand. But sure. I've got him in here because I do think it's possible, given that it's Michigan State, that Mick Cronin might opt to play him at least a little bit to try to find a way to somehow combat MSU's size. He's much like Book, though. He's tall. He's not physical.
Next, we have Brandon Williams, 6'7", 230-pound sophomore. He was injured last year. He's averaging a little over 2.5 points a game, 1.7 rebounds a game. Plays about 12 minutes, shooting 41, 25, and 62.
Yeah, just a guy that, is eating up some minutes at this point. Right. He's got good size. But the skill part hasn't come along as much as they would have liked. But we'll see him in this game for sure, just not likely for a long stint.
And finally, Eric Feeney, 6'4", freshman guard. He's averaging 2 points a game, 1.4 rebounds a game, and he's shooting 37, 33, and 50.
Yeah, and we didn't even have him in our preview in the first game, and I want to check here because I'm not sure. I guess he did see the floor. He played 9 minutes against Michigan State in the first matchup, but that was more than he had been seen at that point. Well, since then, he's started to play a little more consistently. The shooting's okay. He takes about half his shots from three. He's 33% from out there. So, respectable enough shooter. I think he's a guy they think can develop into something going forward. He is in his first year. He's a true freshman. And we probably will see him in this game, would be my assumption, at least for a couple of decent turns.
Yeah, unlike the Rutgers game, UCLA is going to need a little bit of size, I think, in this game to try and match up better against Michigan State in the interior. All right, so who do you have as the player Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter? Brought to you by the Brothers that Just Your Gutters.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a surprise, maybe. The obvious choice, and the choice in the first meeting was, I believe, was Bilodeau, I think.
I think so, yeah.
But I'm going to go with Donovan Dent because I think he's been playing better. I mean, he's coming off the first triple-double in Big Ten tournament history. So he obviously had an impact in the Rutgers game. He's been playing a little better generally coming into this tournament. And, I'm always inclined to go with point guards as the guy you got to worry about to start with, if they're any good at all. You know, and
he has problems everywhere. Yeah.
I think it's a big matchup, him against Fears. I mean, Michigan State just blew him out in the first game. So it wasn't close there. But in fact, I want to look at that. Yeah, I mean, Dent had 6 points in the first game. He was 3 for 8 overall, 0 for 3 from 3. He had 4 assists and 4 turnovers. Jeremy had 16. He was 4 for 8 from 3. So he was a big part of that 3-point barrage. 10 assists, 1 turnover. So that's knockout Fears in the first game. If UCLA is going to win this, I don't know that I believe that they can without Donovan Dent at least playing Jeremy to a standstill. So he's my pick.
And for my family, I ended up with Dent and Perry for those keeping track. So I need them to have good games, but Michigan State to win for the game. All right. So moving on to the reason I have this stupid basketball head. Who cleans the glass? Best friends, if you need your windows cleaned or your house cleaned, the first place you call is the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Troy and his team will get that taken care of right away. They get you 15% off simply by mentioning Final Four and you get your estimate. They'll come out anywhere. If you're in the West Michigan area, let's say, they've even gone as far as the Capitol in Lansing to clean the windows of the state Capitol. They will go to Lakeshore. They go all over the place. So if you're thinking about getting your windows cleaned, which you should, they should be your first call, whether it's your home, your business, any other sort of building that's got windows. If it's got glass, they can clean it. And of course, they sponsor the Who Cleans Glass Best contest between Rod and I. I think it's your pick first here for the contest. For
obviously,
these are exhibition. They're exhibitions. Yeah. I've already paid the price as I'm right now, and after we get to the segment, now I'm gonna have to take it off.
I'll go with Jackson Kohler.
Jackson Kohler. All right. Well, I'll take Cooper and Carr although I think it's interesting. I think Carr's I heard he's got a mask on his face now. He broke his nose or something, or
really?
I'm not sure. I thought I heard that, but maybe I just saw that somewhere in fake news. I don't know. I'll find out, I guess, later this evening.
I'll go with Cam Ward. I think Cam's likely to play a lot of minutes. And I think he's the obvious choice there.
Well, the obvious choice, if you are looking for Spartan apparel, is, of course, Nudge Printing. This is a picture of the Jackson Kohler. They still have the Jackson Kohler collection. You can get his Primal Scream. We've had Jeff Kohler on the show. I'd highly recommend you listen to that show if you've not had a chance. You're looking for extra Michigan State content, as well as perusing all of our videos, of course, and our audio file. If you need Spartan gear, of course, spring coming up, you may make sure you get the right stuff. You can head on over to nudgeprinting.com, or if you're smart, you go to nudgeprinting.com/win. There you can enter the free drawing for a Sparty golf hat. You can see it on the screen right now. If not, you can just go to that nudgeprinting.com/win. Enter for free and do it today. You'll be glad you did. We've given away a lot of things this year. You can also, of course, at that site, you can get our hoodie like I've got on right now. Final Four not on the schedule, or you can also get t-shirts, stickers, whatever it might be. All that stuff can be found there. And the great thing about that is, of course, you get 20% off simply by mentioning, or I should say, by typing in TIFFINOTS, that's TFFINOTS at checkout. And that's 20% off your entire purchase at Nudge Printing. All right, so the first key of the game is attacking the rim.
Yeah, and look, this was something that was a key in the first game, and Michigan State really didn't do it very well in that one because they shot the three so well. But look, given UCLA's profile, given what they are as a team defensively, poor defense against twos, some issues with fouling, though that's improved a little bit. It's still an issue. And obviously defensive rebounding as well. MSU needs to do a lot of what we've seen lately in terms of post scoring and penetration. We saw it even in the loss against Michigan. MSU got really good offensive performances out of Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper. And I thought they did a great job. Let's keep in mind what they were doing that against. They were doing that against the best interior defense in the league. So that means something. They were really good against, particularly Carson, against Purdue late in the season. So we've seen them do this more effectively recently. It would be good to see Cam Ward get back on the beam and give them some interior scoring as well in this one. But it's all there for Michigan State. This is a team you should be able to have success against in the post. You should also be able to have success in terms of, you start with Jeremy Fears, obviously.
Right.
Being a guy who is dynamic by getting downhill, getting into the lane, and either scoring or creating. MSU needs to put constant pressure on UCLA's interior. I think that's a pretty obvious element coming into this one.
And the second key to the game along those lines is the glass. I mean, this is one where Michigan State should control it well. They should be able to rebound, and then they should get some of that easy scoring too at the glass on the offensive end.
Yeah, they won the rebounding battle in the first game, but not to the extent we usually see. Defensive rebounding was on point. UCLA only had a 24% offensive rebounding rate. That's more or less on par with what MSU expects to do at that end. The problem is MSU only grabbed 31% of its own missed shots. That's not MSU standard. So I think we need to see a more conventional gap here, which means Michigan State getting closer to 40 than 30 and doing the same kind of job defensively that they did in the first game.
And the third key of the game is to guard the arc. And, as we mentioned before, UCLA, an excellent 3-point shooting team, not a team that shoots a lot of threes, but they can. This is, you look at upsets, and this would certainly be an upset of some sort, is that 3-point shooting usually comes into play.
That's how I see it. I mean, I mentioned that it's hard to imagine UCLA winning without Dent playing well. I think that's true. The other component, which a little of that has to do with Dent also, is it's hard for me to imagine UCLA winning without them having a significant advantage from the 3 line. And although, as you said, they don't take a ton of them, they're pretty damned efficient when they do. And so MSU's got to work to limit that success. In the first game, they held UCLA to 32%, 8 for 25. And we know Michigan State was ridiculous at 14 for 27. So it wasn't even close. But I would say a repeat performance. They don't have to completely shut UCLA down. But if they limit them to, 32%, that's okay. You can live with that. The problem is if UCLA gets up around 40 or more, that's where I think it becomes a more difficult equation.
And the fourth key of the game is the transition game. This is something that I think not only does Michigan State want to get going for this game, this tournament, but to try and, get this going before the NCAA tournament. I think, I don't know that you need to work on it, but just sort of get feeling better. I think the fast break be helpful.
Yeah. And in the first game, MSU only scored. Again, it's another thing that would normally be a key that they didn't do well, but it didn't matter because of all the threes. They only had 10 points on the break in the first game. Now UCLA only had 2. So it was still an advantage, but 10 points is not Michigan State normally is looking at 6 to 7 points more than that per game on the break. So they're going to want to get more done in this one than in the first game. This is, as we've talked about in a variety of ways, this is not a vintage or even a usual, an average Mick Cronin team defensively. But I do think in that first game, they did show good discipline, good floor balance, and they're certainly going to be looking to do that again. That is guaranteed a point of emphasis in Mick Cronin's preparation for tonight's game, is to make sure that they don't get beat repeatedly down the floor. I think if you're MSU, you can't control what UCLA does in that respect, but what you can do is make sure that you're putting them under more or less constant pressure with the transition game. So that's what I want to see.
Exactly. And then we come to the fifth and final key, and probably the most important key, actually, is that although the Big Ten tournament's a lot of fun, it is a banner you can hang. But let's be honest, it's not that important when it comes to what happens in a week from now. So the health is the number one key, probably, I think.
Yeah, and I did, after you said it, because it had gotten by me, I found one tweet that had a photo that they're claiming to be of Carr wearing a mask.
Yeah.
He said he broke his nose. I've not heard that anywhere else. Maybe it's true. But either way, I wouldn't expect that to keep him out. But that's enough. MSU doesn't need anything more than that if that in fact happened. So that to me is the biggest deal here. Not even just not seeing guys get injured, but also you don't want to see guys logging, let's put it this way. They want to win this game. And I do care about this one.
Oh yeah.
But I don't really want to see Jeremy Fears having to play 38 minutes tonight. I just don't want to see it. I don't think that's good. I don't want to see Carson Cooper playing 34. That is not a recipe for success because, and I will say this, MSU seems likely that you never know for sure, but what you hear being talked about seems to suggest that at least they believe they're very likely to be in Buffalo next week. Well, Buffalo is a Thursday, Saturday location, Thursday, Saturday site. So that means you're getting less rest from whenever you end this Big Ten tournament ride. It's one more reason why I just don't want any part of a game on Sunday. I really don't for this team. If they get there, they get there. I guess we'll see what happens. And if they can get there while playing guys appropriate minutes, then maybe it's not as big a deal. But I do worry about that. But first things first, let's just worry about keeping everybody healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got a text from Jack Ebling, of course, who you've been on the show a ton. The Drive with Jack, which I'd highly recommend. He's always recommending our show, so
going to be on it this afternoon.
Only right that I recommend his.
At some point.
There you go.
I'm not sure when.
He's a great guy. I was on yesterday as well. Yeah. So 3 to 5, I think Eastern, I think is what his show is on. I think it is. So drive time, obviously. It's a great show, great guy. So I'll probably stop by and say hi to him at some point in the arena, but he's on his way here. So although it's a game that we kind of make fun of that it's an exhibition, it largely is. It is kind of fun being around a bunch of Big Ten fans. I will say what's very interesting, and I was thinking about this when I was sitting in the stands, that everybody, I don't care what year it is, but there's universal disdain and booing for Michigan from every Big Ten fan base. And that's been the case every year I've been to this tournament. It's very interesting because you see USC fans kind of bagging UCLA fans. Now I say that, although there were very few in the stands yesterday, right. There were actually 2 USC fans, which funny enough, we're sitting with the Rutgers fans.
2. Wow. That's a lot.
Well, I mean, they've been gone for a while, right? I'm
impressed. Yeah, it's not surprising. And the funny thing is, keep this in mind. As you say, it's annually the case, right? It's not annually the case that Michigan happens to be good this year. Not annually the case that they are. And yet, so what that tells you is there's disdain for everything that program represents.
Yeah.
But you don't, I mean, you shouldn't need to go to a Big Ten tournament to figure that out, but it's nice that it buttresses the point.
No, I know.
Nobody else gets reacted to that way. Nobody else.
Not in Ohio. No Ohio State. People don't care. It's funny. It's
and that's my point is a Michigan slappy would suggest, it's just jealousy. Not in basketball terms, it's not. You haven't done enough for anybody to be that jealous of you. You're not Duke. You're not Purdue. You're not Wisconsin. You're definitely not Michigan State.
Yeah. And we'll leave it there. We'll be back after the show. Of course, like I said, it will not be live, so I apologize for that, but that's just kind of the way the technology is going to work with us today. I know, breaks everyone's heart. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.